Hello, people. It is KraftKraken. It has been some time for those who are paying attention to my activity. But I am here today because, I've been seeing people spread some unwise information about how one should play Total War Warhammer 3, a game I'm very passionate about. And I feel as though this information can lose you games, lose you battles, lose you campaigns, right? So my logic comes from a competitive multiplayer sphere, and these tactics do work in the field. The ones I'm about to explain. Not to say that they'll always see you success. What really determines whether or not you win or lose is like speaking largely in campaigns is like how you set yourself up materialistically. Like, do you have enough resources to trade? Is the engagement happening somewhere that isn't vital to you? You always want to be fighting in enemy territory if possible, because you don't want to fight like in your heartlands, right? Because if you lose a battle, then that quickly transitions into them burning your major cities, right? You want to be fighting in neutral territory or enemy territory. Because if you lose an enemy territory, at least you have time to regroup your material, right? But today we're talking specifically about battles and kind of like the tactics therein. And I'll just share with you kind of my thoughts on what's going on. So, basically, there is talk going on about the box formation again. And box formations are traps. Massive traps. They are very static. You can't adjust them very much, and it leaves many of your units in stasis, right? Like, they aren't doing anything in battle. They're not contributing to killing the enemy, because what this game is about is killing the enemy, getting them off the field, getting them to rout, right? So if you're setting up a box, you got to make sure what's inside it is actually eliminating the foe. Now, when you have a formation like this, with let's Empire as the example, right? You have a bunch of artillery, you got your mage, you got Franz, you're sitting in this box, and you take up a defensive position, and your idea is that you're going to bombard the enemy, right? And that's a fine plan, right? Like, artillery has its place. Well, let me see if I could start using these things correctly here. Let's see here. Boom. Right layer. Yeah, so you want to bombard the enemy, right? So it works to an extent. Mortars are great. I love mortars actually for siege battles, because often people are behind big old walls, which prevents them from just charging you. And for whatever reason, in the fantasy setting, everything has GPS positioning. So if there's a spearman out in front, you can just bombard them, right? So they have their uses. Also, they're really good at killing enemy archers, right? So in this setup, you would do decent damage to the enemy archer line with these mortars, right? Now, the problem with this formation, though, and I guess this setup, right? If you find yourself in a position like this, yeah, is that you're going to be sitting here in your box, right? And the enemy's going to approach you. And all the while, they're going to be taking damage, right? But when they get to about, let's just say this position, yeah? Let's say that you've managed to eliminate, let's be generous. I think you'd eliminate maybe 2, but let's say you got rid of, no, not even. I think you would only get about 2 archers with your 3 mortars. Now, if you're actually playing a really good opponent, okay, like what I would do actually if I was approaching this box, right, is there is hold on, can I actually move these? Yes, I can. So there's a bar. It's like a meter, right? Let me just do this. It's an ammunition meter that sits above your artillery, right? Now, this indicates at a glance, like, you know, how much ammunition you've used, whatever, right? Now, the thing is, it's very easy to watch, right? And the AI automatically guesses the approach of the enemy when it fires, right? So if this formation is moving, right, it's coming down like this, it's going to aim. Let me see if I can do this right. Boom, boom. This mortar is going to aim like out in front, right? Because it wants to hit the spearman by the time it gets there, right? So what I often do is when I see this little ammunition thing drop, right? Boom. I know you fired ammunition. I don't even have to look for the projectiles, right? I know you fired. I will tell my, hold on. I'll tell my formation to halt. And that is enough to get your mortars to miss, especially at max range, right? And then after they have fallen, I can move again and then stop. Move again and then stop, right? The only way to prevent an opponent from dodging all of your artillery this way is to manually get your artillery pieces to fire in staccato, right? Like one after the other or at like random times, right? Or you could actually just manually aim the mortar where you think they're going to be, but that's way too much micro and it's not going to net you a lot of value, right? So anyways, presuming the enemy just charges you without paying attention to, like, you know, when you're firing and dodging your shots, they'll end up about here. They will lose maybe 2 quarrelers, right? Now the problem with your box is that for me to extract value, right, from this position, all I have to do is tell all my archers to start shooting, right? So there, if you let the enemy archers get in range of your artillery, you will lose the artillery. Your box will have meant nothing, right? Because like I have a lot of active pieces now, and ultimately I don't even have to engage my infantry. Like, why bother, right? Now I hold the advantage of DPS. And another thing too about the box situation is that if a mage gets close enough to your box because you haven't decided to like disrupt the enemy approach, right? He's just gonna start dropping bombs on you. And let me see if I can. Boom. So he's gonna wind spell you, right? You just lost your entire front line because you're not moving it, right? Or he's going to start dropping vortexes, right? And vortexes are probably not that big. Like maybe like this big, or hit your cannon, or hit whatever he wants, right? And vortexes, they move around, right? So you're going to lose, like, especially like Mazdamundi banishment or something like that, right? So if you sit in a tight formation, you're gonna get annihilated by enemy mages, right? So not only are you losing your artillery to the quarrelers, you're losing a front line to enemy spellcraft, right? And by the time you realize what's happening to you, you're going to order a countercharge, right? And the thing is, if you're so out of position, like, you will struggle to decide what needs to stay and what needs to go, because like you probably haven't lost all of your artillery yet if you're quick-minded. So maybe you'll like send forward, like, you know, these guys, right? Now, these boys, they're going to be late to the battle because they're on the side and they're angled awkwardly. In the worst case scenario, they will charge and they will stack. And then once again, you will lose them. Oopsie. You'll lose them to enemy spellcraft, right? Like, they'll just get annihilated. Whenever you're fighting a PvP battle, like, actually, Legend of Total War put it well. What this game is about, it's about luring the enemy into spells and army abilities. Like, you want to ambush them in the battlefield that way. That's really how you win, right? Now, you can win just through, like, good positioning and material, but that's a much more granular approach, and it doesn't often turn the tide like spellcraft does, right? So also, you know, you have this cat back here, and they're gonna have to like swing up, and they're gonna take their sweet ass time swinging up, and then maybe while they're on their path, right, they might stack, right? Unless you take like a really conservative like route, like this, you go like that, right, and then you're safe. But that takes time, right? And by the time the cavalry is activated, their cavalry is maybe hammering your flanks, right? Or, I mean, their cavalry can just sit and keep your elements in check, right? Because if the enemy knows that you're precious about your artillery pieces, they don't have to commit the cavalry to extract value, right? So, like, the thing is, you're going to keep these halberdiers next to your artillery because you're precious about them. And that's value. That's like 500 gold just sitting there, right? And you might even keep your cavalry back too, because you want to like be able to counter maneuver the enemy cav if they try to angle for an approach, right? And if this one unit of cavalry is tying down 2 of your units, right? That's value. Like that's, you know, check, right? Like that's what you want. In domination mode, what people do is they will send, I don't know if we have a card here that represents what I want to show you, but they'll take a flyer, right? And they'll fly over a position like this. And just the threat of the flyer keeps your elements back, right? Because you want to countercharge that flyer, right? Now, the thing is too, like, the hard truth about artillery in this game is that unless you're a faction that has, like, buffed it, like Elspeth or Ikit Claw, artillery, it doesn't really get its value unless it spends most of its ammunition, which takes a really long time to actually accomplish on the field, right? The whole point of the box, right, or the logic of the box is that you're holding the position so that your artillery can like eventually win you the battle over a grind, right? And like if you're Chaos Dwarves, sure, maybe that can work. But if you're something like Empire, you don't really have the tools for, unless you're Elspeth, I guess, but I haven't really seen an artillery build out of Elspeth. I've seen people do like Outrider stacks because they could replenish ammunition and they could kite and they could just be adaptable, right? So boxes are rough. So if you are in this position, right, or if you have this force, yeah, like what do you do with it, right? If boxes aren't the answer, how do we win this battle, right? Well, and by the way, just as a side note, the mage staying in the box is also kind of a mistake. It depends. Like, so because your formation's already so tight, a light mage, I'm just presuming like Net of the Mintalk, yeah, it's a bit redundant because like the enemy's not going to penetrate your box unless they have overwhelming force, right? The light mage is better used to tie down the enemy at a distance, right? You want to keep, so like if the enemy archers are threatening to get in range, you want this guy to run intercept. He could actually go into melee if he's on a horse and tie up one whole unit by himself, right? And then like, you know, the enemy might try to counterfire you, right? But you could just micro. And if you're microing, you're tying up basically 3 units, right? Which is value, right? It's not always best to send forward your light mage to do this, but it's an option in your toolbox, right? And it's better than him just sitting here, because if the enemy's in range of your artillery already, Net ain't doing shit for you, right? Maybe you'll throw down a banishment and hit like 1 or 2 guards, but if they have a standard wide formation, you're only gonna hit 1 card, right? So what I would do in this position, if I was green, right, I would deploy the halberdiers more up front. Take a more aggressive stance. Actually, what I would do, yes, I would spread them out like this. I like to call this the flying V. And then the cannons. Presuming this is open field, alright? I think I would position the cannons on the outside. Like this. And then the cavalry would go even wider. And then the mortars, they can be separate. And then your wizard, maybe use one cav back to run intercept. And then Franz would be out front. And the wizard, I think I would run the wizard if he was on horse with another piece of cavalry or center, right? So the reason for the flying V is you want the enemy, oh, let me just delete this here. You want the enemy to be kind of like in defensive mindset. Almost all the time you want to be in an aggressive decision-making mindset, right? So if you really like envelop, right? Hold on, let me just like move these boys out. So if you really try to go for an envelopment here, right? He's going to feel pressured to charge your mortars, right? Which is fine. Because, you know, you only are going to need like a couple dudes to stop the brunt of the main force. And like Franz himself can cover a card, right? You could dive him on something, and that can really lock people up. Like I know a really good dwarf player who deploys like multiple characters out front to be the front line, basically. Because if you charge, right, their unit is going to get stuck, and then they have to click and force path past the character that's swinging at them, right? Which is a micro tax. And what you're trying to do with this kind of build is buy as much time as possible, right? Because you want your artillery to get the most value. And you want to play aggressive and forward because you want the enemy, like ideally, right? And like the cavalry probably like swing way up. Well, it could be like here because we have halberds, so we're not really afraid of enemy cav, but ideally the enemy gets defensive and tries to like move cards this way, right? And the thing is too, if you have artillery going on, ideally your mortars killing the enemy archers as much as possible, because that's really the main threat. You play keep away, right? You let them chase you, right? Because that's kind of like your win con. Once your mortars are done with their ammo, that's it, right? You've extracted tons of value out of them. Now, why the cannons on the flanks? Well, in the situation where the cannon and the cavalry like kind of work in tandem, right? If you're really confident, you could pull forward more halberdiers if things are looking dicey, right? You could like send them to the melee grind, right? You want to be reactive to the state of the battlefield. You don't want to just sit this card here forever if there's no threat, right? But in the situation where this cavalry gets past your halberdiers, right? Or it just decides to ignore them. You want your cavalry to engage from the outside. It could be the inside, but there is a chance that you will suffer crossfire, just depending on the nature of the position, right? You don't want to be firing through your own cavalry, right? You want to be on the outside. And the reason for this is because, well, you know, his troops are going to be lined up like kind of this way, ideally, right? It's probably going to look more like a blob, right? Like this. And then your cannonballs will rake right through them, right? That's the angle you're trying to hit. Now, often, when you have kind of like a box formation, and this is a boxy formation, is the enemy cavalry will attempt a wide arc around you. And normally, the enemy will keep the cavalry in this kind of like box-like formation, which is actually super ideal for you, because then your cannons will, your cannons will get more raking shots across the formation, netting more damage. There's actually a lot of damage if you can get these shots, right? If you are the aggressor, right, and you want to avoid taking damage, you need to go even further outside the enemy cavalry, right? You want them to shoot into their own cav to target you, ideally, and that takes time, right? That's why swinging the cavalry out was effective, because if they ignore your cavalry altogether, like, they just end up getting sandwiched, right? And they lose that cav, and once they lose the cav, these two elements can push forward, right, and contribute to the overall battle. So that's that. And of course, like the mage, if things are getting really bad, like you just lose these guys to the archers or whatever, you can run up the mage and throw a banishment or a net of a mintalk to buy more time for your mortars to fire. And also too, like, if the enemy infantry is, let me just delete this line here. If the enemy infantry is getting close to you, right? Boop, 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 and move them back. I should separate all the cards next time. But anyways, if the enemy infantry is actually closing with you, it's okay to abandon the mortar and, like, run. Right? There's no reason to sit there under fire unless you know you're going to defeat the enemy. Right? So just abandon and just get the fuck out of there. And basically, if they start chasing your mortars, that's technically value for you, right? Now, if they're wise, they'll only send one card. But if they only send one card, then maybe your cavalry can mop them up, or maybe, whatever, right? Any number of things can happen in the nature of the battle. But basically, every outcome for the mortar team is better than them just dying, right? Like, worst case, in campaign, you just retreat them off the field, and you still have your 3 full mortar cards, right? Whereas a box, like, you'd get stuck and you'd get shot down. So, I wonder if I could go back to the primary position, because I also wanted to cover, yes, let's go forward again, okay. So, another thing about boxes and why I don't like them. Let's say you're fighting a Chaos Horde instead, right? Boop. Chaos Horde. Non-traditional. Well, not non-traditional, but just like a big monster blob, SEMs, whatever, right? So the problem with the box is, okay, yeah, the enemy's charging you, you're ripping your shots. I mean, ideally you have more cannons in the composition. Let's just presume all of these are cannons, right? You're going to get a lot of damage. But, well, a lot. You're going to get some damage. You're going to get like 5, maybe 4 shots off on the monsters as they charge in from the front, right? And if you are blind and you're dedicated to your box, what happens is the enemy just smashes into the box right through your infantry, because your infantry does not have the mass to stop a Death Star like this, right? 1 infantry long is not enough. You will need, like, if you're seeing this charging you, first of all, you better run your light mage out to, like, net them, right, to get more cannon shots off. And then you start making, like, let me just do this. So instead of lines that look like this, that are long, you want more thick, like, boxes, box-like lines, right? Because this makes it harder for monsters to push through. There's more mass, right, in a tighter formation like this. So you want to form up like little stacks, right? And then you want to and it's a catch-22 as well, because what's going to happen, right, is if you start bunching up and you start reinforcing the front line, which is what you want to do, right? This is just the grisly nature of warfare in, Warhammer, right? They will, well, first of all, they could, like, go around you because they're faster, in which case that's kind of ideal because you could pivot with them with good micro. But you have to stay real close to your cannons if you want to, like, outrun a monstrous horde trying to, like, you know, go for some sort of flank attack, right? It is possible if you stay right on top of the cannons. But anyways, if they do charge you like this, right? Sartorial over here is going to have a field day blasting you with spells, right? Like, you're just going to get completely annihilated, and it's not going to look good, right? And the thing is, too, about vortex spells and stuff like this, right? A lot of vortex spells don't hurt monsters as much. Like, yeah, if you use Pit of Shades or whatever, right? But, like, if he's using, like, Banishment or Gehenna's Golden Hounds or Bombardments, like Searing Doom. Like, if he's got, God forbid, he's got a wind spell. Because if he's got a wind spell, that's perfect. That's going to annihilate your infantry, and the monsters are going to be unscathed, right? So, infantry on top of the monstrous horde is rough. Like, even if you have cavalry is kind of like actually what you want as mass blockers for your artillery. But the problem with using the cavalry in such a way is that, like, there's no good position, because if you charge forward to block them, like, unless you're running like demis, and demis don't even get that good, right? But you run your cav forward and they start fighting, and the monsters are probably going to win, right? Your cav can only do so much, typically speaking, unless you're, like, playing SFO or something, right? Your cav will get stuck, they'll give their lives, and cannons will have to, well, they don't want to fire through them. You likely won't get your shots because the AI won't allow the cannons to fire through, right? So eventually your cavalry will break. And then you've succeeded in buying time and, like, trading damage, but it's still a real shitty position, right? Like, the best bet really is to kind of... It's gonna be a bit weird, but I think this is the ideal position. You make a funnel, kind of, right? And I guess you have, like, some halberdiers out front just because you want them to suffer the entire time. And something like this, yeah. So maybe not, like, a right in front. Ideally, this happens before. Because you need distance. You need some distance to play with here. So ideally, you get something like this whipped up. And the monsters, like, they kind of... So if they go straight forward, right, you will envelop, which is ideal, because then you have the most units swinging as possible, right? And they start suffering from flanking penalties. And ideally, if they're in a circle, excuse me, if they end up in a circle, then a lot of their units stop firing, or stop firing. They stop attacking because they're stuck from their buddies, right? Now, if he's really trying to push through the center and break away, right, from your envelopment, that's when you pull in the cavalry, right, to, like, really just fucking stick him in the position. Now, the thing is, before this, like, starts, right, the reason why... Actually, I should undo. Undo. Okay, so the reason why you kind of want this envelop is because if the monsters, not these guys, if the trolls and the chaos spawn engage, right, just like in a perfect world, right, the enemy engages the way you want them to, your cannons will get shots down the line, like so, right? And that's ideally what you're after, to maximize the value on your cannons. And then, of course, if there's flyers, they're gonna dive you, and that's when you want cavalry to kind of back them up. But, like, such is the nature of Warhammer, your artillery will be offline for, like, a minute or so while your cavalry deals with the flyers. Now, you need characters like Franz or other duelists to like stop single entity monsters from just diving your backline. Or what you should do is you should get Nolan Ironsides ultimately. I love Nolan Ironsides. They're just such a fantastic unit. I like them much better than the long rifles. So yeah, they're in red. Hold on, let's get the green ones. Oh, I don't have the green ones. Let's see here. Copy. Paste. Cool, okay. Yeah, so ideally you get Nolan Ironsides because they suppress, which is a crazy power. That's minus 40% speed. Wait. Yeah, they suppress. They suppress in vanilla. So they suppress the target as they fly in, which buys you a ton of time, does a ton of damage. But I found that Nolan Ironsides like struggle to shoot at ground targets. For whatever reason, really. I just don't know what their fucking problem is. CA really, really, really needs to fix the targeting algorithms. But anyways, Nolan Ironsides and guns can like kill things in the air. And actually, if they're suppressed, the cannons will be more likely to hit as well, which is badass. And then you could use your wizard too, right? Like once they start diving, you could suppress them or net them, and it'll stop them from moving. So you can do that too. But yeah, fighting a monstrous horde happens. Like if you're fighting Tamarkan and his Rot Knights and his Great and Clean ones, he's just gonna fucking dive into your box, and your box is just going to die. Because a lot of your elements will just be sitting here. Right, and by the time, you know, let's say these guys are dead, let's push them off to the side, right? By the time they've broken through your front line, just purely by force pathing, right? Your artillery is already compromised, and you're losing a ton of value. And it's not just the value that sucks to lose, right? You're losing balance of power as well. So like, you know, even if you believe in your mind that it's okay to lose the artillery, if you can get some sort of like counter surround with your remaining elements, right? Losing all of your artillery will take you one step closer to actually just losing the fight altogether, right? And that is my tangent on boxes and why I don't like them. So what do you do without boxes though, right? Like we want to have a deep formation, or let's back up and say, do boxes have any good points, right? Is there any advantages to boxes in a competitive environment? And I say competitive, but I'm just meaning like a foe that has the capability of defeating you, right? So let's just move these guys back and let's just move these guys. So in my mind, right, what my mind tells me about boxes is that they're very easy to use, right? So like you set your box up, and then you just chill. There's not much micro required for the box to do what it wants to do. Now it might not extract the most value from all the units in the formation, but it lets you, like, if you're in a really high stakes end game scenario, I guess, often battles come down to character management and like using elite troops, right, properly. And you'll have like little skirmishes out on the side, right, with all these elite forces. And often this is what determines like a good chunk of the fight, right? Because if you could destroy the enemy X factors, the enemy like characters in command, then you're one step closer to victory and defeating your foe. But yeah, so if you have a box, like you just sit there and your cannon shoot and like, you're good. And the enemy has to not only duel your characters, where all your micro attention is focused probably, but they also have to like move the formation and like also, you know, defeat your main army, right? The main purpose of artillery, in my humble opinion, in this game, is to force a kind of situation. Or in vanilla, I should say, is to force a situation, because artillery just isn't that strong. So you could sit under cannon fire for like a little bit and be fine. It's not really immediately like battle ending, right? Like a cannon battery can fire 5 cannons and everything can be fine. Um, so yeah, it forces the situation because even in vanilla, you can't let the enemy like use all of the cannon ammunition because that is a win condition, right? Um, so it forces them to do one of two things: either stay out of range, right, or to charge, right? That's basically the options you're giving your opponent, right? Um, and that could be of utility to you, right? If you want to fight around the enemy having the mindset of they must charge you, that's great, right? Then you could plan around that, right? Like maybe instead of like mortars, you have like one cannon, right? Even one cannon is enough to force this kind of mindset on your opponent because people don't like getting shot at, right? So maybe instead of that, you have, let's just be greedy. Let's just say you have like demis, right? Or let's say that you have, I thought I had produced the card before. Where is it? Oh, there they are. Okay, let's, nope, boom. Yeah, let's say you have like a bunch of Null and Iron sides, right? So like, you can definitely play around the idea of putting the enemy in the mindset of having to fight you in melee. Like maybe that's what you want. Maybe you got these guys, and maybe you also got there's a character for this. Like you got Warrior Priest, right? So it's actually you have a melee build, not really an artillery build, right? It kind of feels like an artillery build because you have like one cannon, but actually you want to fight them in melee. It's a great strategy. It also forces haste, and like, you know, haste makes waste. Enemies might blunder, right? They might really want to get on your cannon because it's shooting, and you know they might end up in a position where multiple cards stack on each other, and then you just annihilate them with a big old spell, right? So they have their uses. What's another good thing about a box? Let's just go back a bit. So another great thing about a box. And I'll kind of explain a different formation that I like to use instead of boxes for this, but let's say you're fighting like, let me see if we can find them. Like you're fighting Chaos Warriors. Did I not deploy them? Let's see here. Boop. Infantry. Alright, let's just say it's a scary warband, and you have to fight all the flavors of chaos. Let's just get the Nurgle guy in here too. Yeah, there we go. Right. Fighting big infantry, you don't like it, right? Having a box formation makes it so that to be efficient, like the enemy can't just send all of its troops at your front line, right? Because these guys aren't really going to be doing much fighting. It's really only the front. When I say the front line, like the enemy models that are in contact with each other. They're the ones doing the fighting. That's your DPS, right? So what they're going to want to do instead, because most enemies will deploy in a standard like line formation like this, which is fine, right? But it will force them to have to swing around. Right? If they want to get full value out of their infantry, they gotta wrap around your box, right? And the problem with that for the enemy so the problem with that is, hold on, let me just move quick fast, is that this takes time, right? And that time is less DPS for them, right? And that's of serious utility, because it takes actually a lot of micro to get these guys in position such that they don't like clump up on each other, right? Like, especially if your line is like really just like vertical, like straight, they have to make sure they have enough space and then go in, right? And some enemies, they'll just be like, okay, you charge, and this guy, when he's about here, he's gonna try charging, and then like the unit gets like stretched out, right, like across these two, and then you're gonna get a big spell, right? Those are the moments that you're looking for that turn the battle, right? And then if you're like a real fucking, you know, conniving bastard like I am, I might even tuck the formation away even further from this guy, right? To buy even more time, right? And make it harder to engage me, right? So that's another awesome thing about the box. Another great thing about the box is I think the box is a fine, like, starting formation for the outset of a battle. Because often the enemy will have a fast mover like a hound, right? And these hounds can deploy in Vanguard, right? And the enemy, like, they'll probably be hiding in like a fucking tree, right? That's what they usually do with their Vanguards. They'll be hiding and they'll be looking for that opening, right? And sometimes, like, it happens to me too often, more than I like to admit. Like, I'll have a formation that's like, kind of like this, and like the back's exposed for some reason, and then I'll just get jumped on by hounds because, like, I totally forgot that they had the card. And hounds do a lot of damage. Like, there's a reason why they're one of the best units for taking down gates. So you gotta be careful for hound play, even towards the end stages of a game or campaign. Like, well, I mean, if you're fighting doom stacks with like all tier 5 and 4 shit, then whatever, right? Hounds don't really matter much. But if we're talking like, you know, mid tier, there's some vulnerable pieces. You still got like archers that don't want to be melee. You gotta respect hounds. You gotta respect hounds. So the box formation prevents hound attacks and like Vanguard shenanigans, right? Also, another cool thing about boxes, it's not really, I think it's something that might be overlooked often, is that boxes are tight formations. And while that's generally bad for the reasons I already went over, like, let's say that this is the entirety of the battle map, right? And let's say I wasn't fighting Chaos, because Chaos is scary. But let's say I was just fighting the Empire player. Like so. Okay. So most people will deploy front and center. Because I don't know, actually, reasons people just like deploying in the center. Unless there's some like crazy advantageous battlefield feature, most people will just deploy center. Now, if you want to buy time, like, and especially if your opponent's running infantry, which is really hard to like maneuver in truth, it's great to just like deploy to one side. Now, just to be clear, I don't mean white line camp. That's something that's looked frowned upon in the multiplayer community. We don't do it. We always leave space for the enemy to like get around. And what is space? It's 4 infantry units long. So it's a pretty good amount of space to work with, but the enemy still can flank you, right? But even having deployed like this far away, right? Even without white line camping, the enemy now has to... Oh. Okay, hold on. Let me just like get this out. Okay. So the enemy has to now pivot their formation and then charge you, right? And the thing about that is, like, it's kind of funny because like you'll be deployed like this, right? Oopsie. Good music, by the way. Copyright free. Anyways, you'll be deployed like this, right? Aimed at the enemy, like ready for this kind of engagement. The enemy will not be ready. If the enemy is hasty, especially, and they might be hasty if they're under cannon fire immediately, they will charge you like this, which is terrible for them. This is a terrible engagement angle, right? And like, what's better for you too is like if you see this and you're quick on your feet, you're adaptable, you will swing out with your mobile elements, and you will get on his range units, right? Now, yeah, because the thing is too, like he'll engage with the front line, and then these guys have to like wrap around, which takes time, right? And another point too is that the archers, like these guys might. Let me just say this: if you're a smart player, right, like I've been instructing and coaching, you will send out your front line before the archers get in range of your artillery, right? So if they want to actually avoid the conflict, they have to walk around. If they want to contribute to this frontline fight, they can. They could shoot, but that's going to eat more time, right? Like ideally, you will have actually, broken the box at this point to take whatever kind of engagement you want on top of their bad angle, right? Now, the enemy might, and if the enemy does this, like they take their time and they reform ranks and then charge you, that's ultimately, like, it's fine, right? Like, you're in the same position as if you were a center, but it's kind of like a maneuvering check on your foe. Because you're always looking to get them to, like, slip up. You're looking to get them to stack their units for a spell. You're looking to frustrate, their plans, right? Like, if they're expecting a front engagement, give them a side engagement, right? Another thing too, I'll just move these guys back. Let's say that you do start like this, and you're far away from each other. Let's say the map, provides, right, and you're far. And you formed up, the enemy looks at your formation, and is like, okay, we're doing this straight on thing, right? Another way to take this position is just to swing out really hard with your cavalry and your infantry, right? Like, you take these guys, you move them over, you take these guys, you move them. Actually, maybe like you leave... excuse me. You would leave one cav back, right? You take these guys and you go hard on their flank, right? And this too might get them to overcommit resources, right? And if they overcommit, then your artillery gets more time firing, right? I'll talk about another battle where I kind of did something like this that actually made me win a losing fight. We'll have to have a big stream about misdirection and what that means in Warhammer. So what do I like to do instead of boxes, right? Now, the composition is going to be a bit different. I'm going to use less mortars, because as much as I like them, I'd probably use one of each, and then I would bring in, I keep making them and I keep deleting them. So you copy, paste, there you go. Okay. So I'd have my Knoll and Ironsides. And they would be, about right here-ish. And so the important distinction to make, because this formation is going to look like very similar to a box. It's like, what did you actually accomplish? KraftKraken isn't the same damn thing? It'd be kind of like this. Maybe I'd use like 3 units out front. Now mind you, like I might not do this against a quarreler formation, right? Like I'd probably do this against a Chaos Horde, right? We'll just bring in the Chaos Horde, because why not? Okay. So we do this, we get this guy out here, get this guy out here. So Anticity puts emphasis on this a lot too, but it's really all about crossfire. And then your cavalry can work the flanks to disrupt, and your mage can be out front to disrupt, or you could be on like right behind these Knoll and Ironsides. Franz should definitely be up there to disrupt, or back here with the cavalry if he's got like a good mount or whatever, right? Maybe you got like one center dude. So, like, the thing about a deep formation like this, I call this a deep formation, not a box formation, right? Now, what really makes the difference? A deep formation is willing to provide gaps in its own battle lines. Like, so instead of deploying, like, this, right? Like, this is kind of standard, like the long line, and normally players will, like, attach them together, right? Now, the problem with these lines is that you get hit by wind spells. Like, you'll lose 2 units right off the bat, basically. Now, the box is not perfect. Like, you'll get hit by a vortex, right? But if you have 2 boxes... let me just delete this layer. Oh, I said delete the layer, please. Thank you. So if you have 2... Actually, I deleted something. Oh, okay. I see what I did there. Let me just move it off screen. Okay. So you have 2 boxes kind of split like this instead of the battle line. That means that your guns can shoot through the gaps, right? And that's super critical because, like, this game is just so many firing issues that if you run straight lines, like, you're just at disadvantage. You're probably not going to get your shots off unless you're using archers. Like, Sisters of Avalon, right? But also, boxes kind of, at least in my opinion, I'm like 95% sure this is true. Deploying in a box increases the time it takes for enemy melee units to actually chew through the entirety of the formation. Because they need to get more models in contact with the perimeter of the box, right? Which takes more time than just crashing into a front line against a front line, right? Like, because there's more active warriors ready to swing on the front line. So if these 2 like charge like that, then you're getting max damage immediately. Whereas, like, oopsie, what? How come there you go. Whereas if this front line smashed into a box, these corner elements still have to, like, wrap around, right? Which takes more time, right? Now, some people might be like, well, why don't you deploy like this? Just like a, you know, a noodle, right? Well, you know, I've seen domination battles where people do this with peasants and zombies to, like, disrupt. Right? Because, like, you know, the theory is that if they're hitting you like this, then they have to kind of wrap down, which takes time. I don't know. I've never seen these work. And at worst, because, like, the way this game works, right? Your men are all faced forward. And so if you get hit from the side by, like, a cavalry, right? They're just blasting right through your formation. Now, what actually this formation is useful for is needling the thread, right? It's a statement that Turin makes a lot. Yeah, thread the needle. Or needling the thread. Threading the needle. Anyways. So let's say the enemy, like, there's a gap, right, that forms in their formation. If you have infantry that's, like, really strong, you can just slither on up through the formation, right? And that's super useful. And if you're really, really good at the game, you got, like, a lot of micro, you could start an engagement like this, right? And then you could, like, pull back and then try to force a small opening so that a concentrated force can slip through, right? Now, what's actually, like, a real meta play, like a real just god tier gamer play? Oh, excuse me. Is, let's say you have formations about to clash, right? And then you see the enemy execute their charge orders, right? So now their unit is kind of locked on to your unit, right? You, in response, wheel away, which will force the enemy to kind of drag out their battle lines unless they're really paying attention to what's going on, right? And then with the gap formed, you can just, you know, go right on through, right? Now, It really depends on the context of what's going on and like what this unit is. But often, like sending one unit alone into the teeth of the middle of the enemy formation gets them killed. It just straight up does. It's the nature of Warhammer. Because usually all of their like strong elements are at the center of the formation, so people just like to deploy. There's a lot of logic in theory, but like I think that people should deploy asymmetrically more often. But anyways, I'm just a general that likes misdirection. But if you do get something through the line like this, especially with infantry, often I just have it collapse immediately as much as possible. Because if you could break this front line, now you have 2 units moving into the enemy, right? And that's what you want. So we're going to back up and we're going to go back to the little boxes. So why these little boxes? Another reason, right? Is these Nolan Ironsides. Excuse me. I'll use this color. These Nolan Ironsides are going to be also in that box formation. And what that allows them to do is it allows them to pivot faster. Why is pivoting faster important? Because like in this game, I'm going to bring it out again. If you have a long line like this, let's say these are all handgunners or Nolan Ironsides, right? And let's say that, boop, Nolan Ironsides. And then, yeah, fuck it. Let's just say there's a troll, right? And if the troll decides, let me just move this color over here. I should have it on both flanks of my screen. That's what I should do. If he's running this way, right? That means that to fire, the formation will have to pivot. Like after a certain amount of distance has been covered by the trolls, right? They will pivot. But the pivot happens a lot like this. It goes the middle first, and then these guys running up to actually match the formation. And these guys turn around and they run extra far, just like this side, to match this formation, and then they turn around again, right? So the fact that you're losing a lot of value on these 2 flanks is primarily the reason why this box formation is more ideal. Because the pivot happens a lot faster throughout the formation, right? There's no like long, wide, sweeping angle sides to have to pivot or to rotate around, right? And also for the purposes of crossfire, right? Boxes are better because like often if the enemy is going to attack with like infantry, let's say, or even monsters, they'll wrap around, right? And these elements get exposed by the other Ironsides and they get shot, right? Worst case scenario, because just how the game is, if you have a long formation, the Ironsides won't be able to draw line of sight to the enemy. And then you're just sitting there losing value, right? So you set up a bunch of these boxes. Excuse me. So you're setting up like a bunch of these boxes, and it looks like this, really. And that is much more ideal. Actually, the cavalry can stay in a long line because they want the most units as possible, making melee contact. You could run thin lines of cavalry too, if you're really trying to punch through a certain part of the formation, but I think Bretonia has a specific formation for it, which makes it better. And then, I mean, this would do fine. And then, like, would you want a light mage? Maybe. So, like, a light mage can stop a charge from, like, a group of monsters, right? Actually, another note about light mages I want to really impress upon you. Let's say the enemy's charging like this, right? Just cuz. And they charge in. Now, if you can net the first two, or like the first group, right? Let's get some more monsters back here. Let's just say these two. If you can net those two, right? These guys will actually get stuck. Oh. They'll get stuck on the first two guys. So you effectively have netted a total of 6, right? So, you know, you don't always have to get like the perfect net that gets the most on contact. If you could just trip up the enemy formation, that's just as effective, right? Other mages you could use here. You could use like Azir Mage to like to drop down a Comet of Cassandora on a blob, a monster blob. But ultimately, the best mage in the game is the Metal Mage because of Final Transmutation. Final Transmutation is just stupidly overpowered in vanilla, and it flips battles by itself. Because a lot of value in campaign, it comes down to like a lot of characters, and it does great single target damage to characters, and that's what you want. You just want to keep spamming that spell. All right, this was my rant about formations and boxes and what you do in various positions. If you like the content I make, you could check me out here, Twitch. You could go to YouTube. No, I already said here. Here, Twitch. I make art on Twitter, so you can check that out too. And that's going to be it for me. This is KraftKraken, signing out. Bye-bye.